My stepmother's palm stung against my cheek, a sharp and burning reminder of my place in her world. She loomed over me in the hallway of my dead father's house, eyes wide with a manic sort of triumph, and spat the words she had been waiting 2 decades to say to my face. She told me no one cared. She told me I was alone. She truly believed it too. Then the doorbell rang, sharp and demanding, and I knew she was wrong. My name is Lena Carver, and I am 28 years old. I was standing in the center of the foyer in a house that technically belonged to my father, though every square inch of it screamed the name of the woman who had spent the last 15 years erasing him. The air inside the house was cold. It was a sterile, manufactured chill that had nothing to do with the Ohio winter rattling the window panes outside, and everything to do with the woman pacing in front of me. Marla preferred the thermostat set to 68 degrees regardless of the season, a temperature that kept everything crisp, preserved, and lifeless. I looked around the living room while she poured herself a glass of Chardonnay. This place used to smell like cinnamon and heavy pine soap when my mother was alive, back when the floorboards were scuffed oak and the furniture was soft, inviting velvet that you could sink into. Now, it was a mausoleum of white marble and beige linen. It was a museum curated by Marla, designed to impress neighbors she secretly hated and to photograph well for social media. The walls were the worst part. They were covered in a gallery of framed photographs, arranged with military precision. There was Caden, her golden son, holding a basketball trophy from high school. There was Caden graduating from a state college in Florida. There was Marla and my father on a cruise ship, her hand placed possessively over his chest, her smile wide and practiced. And then there were the group shots, the Christmas cards sent out to hundreds of people, where I was always positioned on the far edge of the frame, slightly out of focus, or looking away, as if I were a ghost haunting my own family. There was not a single trace of my biological mother. No old portraits, no knickknacks, not even the ceramic vase she had made in a pottery class the year before she died. Marla had purged it all under the guise of decluttering and modernizing. "You are not listening to me, Lena," Marla said, her voice snapping me back to the present. The ice cubes in her glass clinked against the crystal. "I asked you when you plan on removing your boxes from the garage. The realtors are coming on Tuesday to take photos for the listing, and I will not have your junk cluttering up the space." I stood with my hands clasped behind my back, a habit I had developed in boardrooms in Denver to stop myself from fidgeting. "I told you, Marla, we are not selling the house on Tuesday. We cannot list the property until probate clears." Marla laughed, a dry, dismissive sound that grated against my nerves. She took a sip of wine, leaving a perfect crescent of lipstick on the rim. "Probate is a formality for families who do not have their affairs in order. Your father left everything to me. He wanted me taken care of. He knew Caden and I were the ones who were actually here." She emphasized the word here like it was a weapon. This was her favorite narrative, the narrative of the grieving, devoted widow in the cold, distant stepdaughter who had fled to Colorado to play with computers while the family suffered. "I was here every month, Marla," I said, keeping my voice level. "I flew back every time he was hospitalized. I paid the bills for the private room at the clinic in Shaker Heights because you said the insurance would not cover it." "Writing a check is not the same as holding a hand," she shot back, stepping closer. Her perfume was overwhelming, a heavy floral scent that masked the smell of the alcohol on her breath. "You think your money buys you absolution? You think because you struck it lucky with some little phone app that you can buy your way out of guilt? Your father died wondering why his daughter preferred a laptop screen to his face. It was a lie. I knew it was a lie because I had the voicemails saved on my phone, the ones where Dad sounded tired but proud, asking about my work, asking if I was eating enough. But Marla knew exactly where to stick the knife to make it hurt. She knew that deep down, the little girl inside me was still terrified that I had not been enough. "I am not here to argue about guilt," I said. "I am here to talk about the house and the supplemental trust." The room went very quiet. The only sound was the hum of the expensive refrigerator from the kitchen and the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. Marla froze, her glass halfway to her mouth. "What did you say?" she whispered. The supplemental trust, I repeated, forcing my posture to remain straight. The one Dad set up 5 years ago, before his heart condition worsened. The one that specifically protects the equity of this house and the portfolio my mother left behind. I have a copy. Marla, I know that half of this estate does not belong to you. It belongs to me, held in trust until I turned 30 or until Dad passed. Marla set her glass down on the coaster with a heavy thud. Her composure, that carefully lacquered mask she wore for the world, began to crack. A vein throbbed in her neck. That is nonsense, she hissed. Your father dissolved all those old accounts. We consolidated everything. He wanted to simplify our finances. He wanted peace, I corrected her. And you bullied him into signing papers he did not understand when he was medicated. But this trust? This one was notarized before the surgeries. It is ironclad. And it says you cannot sell this house without my signature. Marla moved so fast I almost missed it. One moment she was standing by the coffee table, and the next she was rushing at me. Her face contorted into a snarl that looked terrifyingly ugly on her preserved features. She shoved me. It was not a gentle push. She drove the heels of her hands into my shoulders with all her weight. I stumbled back, my boots losing traction on the polished marble floor. My back slammed hard against the antique china cabinet. The glass panes rattled ominously, and the porcelain figurines inside, her precious Lodro collection, shook on their shelves. You ungrateful little brat, she screamed. The veneer of the grieving widow was gone, replaced by the woman who used to lock my mother's photo albums in the basement so I could not look at them. You come into my house, after I nursed him, after I cleaned him, and you try to steal from me? It is not stealing if it is mine, Marla, I said, winded but standing my ground. Then she hit me. It was a full, open-palm slap across the face. It was the kind of blow that carried 20 years of resentment behind it. Her ring caught my cheekbone, scratching the skin, and the force of it snapped my head to the side. The sound was distinct, a wet, meaty crack that echoed off the high ceilings and the cold stone walls. My cheek burned instantly. My ear rang. I stood there, stunned, tasting the metallic tang of blood where my tooth had cut the inside of my lip. She had never hit me before. She had ignored me, belittled me, psychologically dismantled me, but she had never laid a hand on me. Not until now. Marla was breathing heavy, her chest heaving. She did not look sorry. She looked exhilarated. You listen to me, she growled, stepping into my personal space until I could feel the heat radiating off her. She grabbed my chin, forcing me to look at her. You are going to sign whatever waiver I put in front of you. You are going to go back to Denver and play with your computers and pretend this house never existed, because if you try to fight me, I will destroy you. She released my chin with a shove. Look around. Lena, she said, spreading her arms wide, encompassing the silent, perfect house. Who do you think is going to believe you? The neighbors love me. The church loves me. Everyone saw me pushing your father's wheelchair while you were 2,000 miles away. You are the cold, absent daughter. I am the saint. She leaned in close again, her voice dropping to a whisper that was more terrifying than her scream. No one stands with you, Lena. No one cares about you. You are exactly what you have always been. An outsider, a burden. Even your father knew it. Why do you think he never fought for you? Because it was easier to let you go. The words landed like physical blows. No one cares. It was the mantra she had fed me since I was 9 years old, wrapped in different packages. Sometimes it was, Caden needs more attention. Sometimes it was, your dad is too tired for your drama. But the core message was always the same. You are alone. I felt tears prick the corners of my eyes, a reflex I hated. But underneath the shock and the pain, something else was happening. A cold, hard clarity was settling over me. I did not retreat. I did not cry out. Instead, my eyes flickered briefly over Marla's shoulder. Behind her, on the grand bookshelf filled with leather-bound books that no one in this house had ever read, sat a small, unassuming object, It looked like a modern, abstract sculpture, a small black cube with a tiny lens that blended perfectly with the shadows between the novels. I saw the microscopic red light pulsing. I had placed it there 10 minutes ago, right after I arrived, while Marla was busy opening her wine in the kitchen. Marla was still talking, lost in her victory lap. You will leave tonight. You will stay at a hotel, and tomorrow morning, you will call my lawyer and tell him you were mistaken about the trust. Ding dong. The sound of the doorbell was jarring. It was a loud, aggressive chime that cut through the tension like a knife. Marla flinched violently. She looked at the door, then back at me. Panic flaring in her eyes. The mask slammed back into place instantly. It was terrifying to watch. In the span of 3 seconds, she smoothed the front of her cashmere sweater, checked her reflection in the hallway mirror, and wiped the rage from her face, replacing it with a look of mild confusion and weary grace. "Do not move," she hissed at me, pointing a manicured finger at my chest. "Do not say a word. If that is Mrs. Gable with the casserole dish, you stay out of sight. I do not want anyone seeing you looking like a mess." She really thought I was the one who should be hiding. Marla walked to the heavy oak door, her heels clicking on the marble. She took a deep breath, composing herself, preparing to play the role of the grieving widow once more. She unlocked the deadbolt and pulled the door open. "Hello?" Marla said, her voice soft and welcoming. "I am sorry, I was just—" The words died in her throat. The cold wind from outside rushed into the hallway, carrying snowflakes that danced in the warm light of the foyer. Standing on the porch was not Mrs. Gable. It was not a neighbor with a casserole. Standing there, wrapped in a heavy wool coat that had seen better decades, was my grandmother, Elise, my biological mother's mother. She was 78 years old, shrinking in height but radiating a kind of energy that could level a building. And standing right next to her, looking solemn and official in his uniform, was Deputy Miller from the town sheriff's department. The floorboards creaked, a sound I remembered from my childhood, the specific groan of the wood when someone stepped over the threshold, as my grandmother stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. Marla stumbled back a step, her hand going to her throat. "Elise? Deputy? What is going on here? We were just having a private family moment." My grandmother did not look at Marla. She did not look at the expensive furniture or the walls stripped of her daughter's memory. Her eyes locked onto me. She saw me standing by the china cabinet, my posture rigid. Her gaze traveled up to my face. She saw the red, angry welt blooming on my cheekbone. She saw the slight swell of my lip. She saw the way I was holding my arm where Marla had grabbed me. The silence in the hallway was absolute. It was heavy and suffocating. Grandma Elise turned her head slowly to look at Marla. Her expression was not one of shock. It was an expression of confirmation. It was the look of a woman who had suspected a fire for a long time and had finally found the smoke. Marla tried to laugh, a nervous, high-pitched sound. "Oh, goodness. Elise, don't look at me like that. Lena and I were just arguing. You know how emotional girls get." She slipped. "It is nothing." Grandma Elise took a step forward. She reached into her oversized purse and pulled out a thick manila envelope. "You told her no one cared, didn't you?" Grandma said. Her voice was quiet, but it carried more power than Marla's screaming ever could. "You told her she was alone." Marla blinked, confused. I don't know what you are talking about." Grandma didn't answer her. She looked at the deputy. "Are you recording this, officer?" Deputy Miller tapped the body camera on his chest. "Yes, ma'am, since we stepped onto the porch." Grandma looked back at Marla, and for the first time in my life, I saw genuine fear in my stepmother's eyes. Grandma wasn't just a sweet old lady with a jar of jam anymore. She was the cavalry. "She isn't alone, Marla," Grandma said, her voice trembling slightly with rage. "And neither are you. But only one of us has the deed to this house in their purse." Marla's mouth fell open, but before she could scream, before the explosion that I knew was coming, My mind snapped back. The sight of my grandmother standing there, defending me, pulled a thread in my memory, unraveling the years, taking me back to the very first time I realized that this house was no longer my home. The year I turned 9 years old. My life was divided into two distinct eras. There was the era of cinnamon and pine soap, and then there was the era of bleach and lemon-scented air freshener. Lakefield, Ohio, was the kind of town where memory was supposed to be stubborn. It was a place where families lived in the same houses for 3 generations, and the high school trophy case hadn't been dusted since 1985. But inside our house, memory was becoming an endangered species. My mother had been gone for 11 months when the smell changed. She had died of a quiet, aggressive cancer that stole her away before I fully understood that she was not coming back. In the months right after the funeral, the house had been messy and sad, but it had felt familiar. My dad and I existed in a haze of grief, eating takeout pizza on the living room rug and leaving laundry in baskets for too long. It was a chaotic, hurting ecosystem, but it was ours. Then Marla arrived. She did not enter our lives like a storm. Storms are loud and honest. Marla entered like a professional organizer hired to clean up a spill. She was a friend of a friend from my father's firm, a woman who wore tailored blazers on weekends and whose hair never seemed to move, even when the wind blew off the lake. I remember the first time she came for dinner. I was sitting at the kitchen table doing my math homework, trying to ignore the gnawing emptiness that appeared every day around 5 in the afternoon, the time my mother used to start cooking. Marla walked in carrying a white bakery box tied with a gold ribbon. "I thought we could all use a little sweetness," she said, her voice bright and melodic, like a wind chime that wouldn't stop ringing. She didn't bring a casserole or a lasagna like the church ladies. She brought a raspberry torte from the expensive bakery in the city, the kind that looked too perfect to eat. It tasted like sugar and chemicals. Nothing like the lumpy, burnt-edge brownies my mom and I used to make, but Dad ate 2 slices. I saw his shoulders relax for the first time in nearly a year. He looked at Marla not with passion, exactly, but with the desperate relief of a drowning man who has just been thrown a very sturdy life raft. "We need a fresh start, Lena," Dad told me later that night, tucking me in. She is good for us. She knows how to make things run again." He didn't say she knew how to love us. He said she knew how to make things run. The wedding happened 4 months later. It was small, efficient, and took place at the courthouse. I wore a blue dress that Marla had picked out because she said black was too morbid for a celebration of new beginnings. The erasure began the very next day. It started with the mantelpiece. For my entire life, the center of our living room had been a large, framed photograph of my mother and me at the botanical gardens. In the picture, Mom was laughing, her head thrown back, her hair wild and frizzy from the humidity. It was the most alive thing in the room. I came home from school on a Tuesday to find the mantel bare, except for 2 heavy silver candlesticks and a vase of silk flowers. Panic, cold and sharp, spiked in my chest. I ran into the kitchen where Marla was organizing the spice rack, replacing our mismatched jars with uniform glass containers. "Where is Mom?" I asked. Marla didn't look up from her label maker. "Oh, sweetie, I moved some things around. We wanted to open up the space, make it feel less heavy." I found the picture later. It hadn't been thrown away. Marla was too smart for that. It had been relocated to the hallway that led to the garage, hung on a narrow strip of wall between the coat closet and the mudroom door. It was a transitional space, a place you walked through to get somewhere else, not a place you lingered. "It is safer there," Marla told me when she caught me staring at it. "Direct sunlight fades old photographs. We want to preserve it, don't we?" It sounded reasonable. It always sounded reasonable. But even at 9, I understood the geography of a home. Putting someone on the mantel meant they were the heart of the house. Putting someone by the garage door meant they were on their way out. Grandma Elise became my only tether to the world that was disappearing. She would drive over on Sunday afternoons in her rattling sedan, bringing jars of strawberry jam that was too runny but tasted like real fruit. "Look at you," Grandma would say, squeezing me until my ribs hurt. "You have your mother's chin. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." She would sit with me in my room, ignoring Marla's polite offers of tea downstairs, and she would tell me stories. She told me how my mother used to get caught sneaking stray cats into the basement. She told me about the time Mom dyed her hair purple in college. She planted these stories in my mind like seeds, desperate to keep a garden growing in soil that was rapidly being paved over. But Marla was allergic to the past. Whenever she entered the room while Grandma was talking, the air pressure shifted. "Elise, you are living in ancient history," Marla would say with a tight, pitying smile. "Lena needs to focus on her grades and her future. Dwelling on sad things isn't healthy for a developing mind." "Remembering her mother isn't dwelling, Marla. It is loving," Grandma would snap back. "It is morbid," Marla would counter, smoothing down her skirt. "We are focusing on the positive here. We are moving forward." The moving forward involved renovations. That was Marla's word for it. Slowly, piece by piece, our home was dismantled. The soft, saggy beige sofa where Mom used to read to me was replaced by a stiff leather sectional that squeaked when you moved. The yellow curtains in the kitchen were swapped for gray blinds that let in a harsh, filtered light. No clutter became Marla's law. Clutter turned out to be anything that had a personality. My drawings on the fridge? Clutter. The stack of paperback books Dad kept by his chair? Clutter. The collection of sea glass Mom and I had gathered on our one trip to the ocean? Dust collectors. "You have to understand, Lena," Marla said, handing me a plastic bin. "A clean house is a clean mind. We can't have piles of junk everywhere. It makes Daddy anxious." She always used Dad as the shield. She knew I would do anything not to upset him. So I put the sea glass in the bin. I put the drawings in the trash. I learned to make myself small, compact, and frictionless. Then Caden arrived. Caden was Marla's son from her first marriage. He was 14, 3 years older than me, and he moved in 6 months after the wedding. He was loud in a way that took up physical space. He slammed doors. He left his oversized sneakers in the middle of the hallway, and he played video games that sounded like explosions. Rules that applied to me seemed to evaporate when they touched Caden. Marla's no-clutter policy didn't extend to Caden's sports gear, which was sprawled across the new leather sofa. Her quiet hours didn't apply to his music. "He is a boy," Marla would say, beaming at him as he inhaled 3 servings of dinner while I picked at my vegetables. "Boys are spirited. He needs room to express himself." If Caden was the sun, burning bright and demanding gravity, I was designated as the satellite that was expected to drift quietly in the dark. This was Marla's masterpiece of manipulation. She didn't lock me in a closet. She didn't starve me. She didn't beat me. Instead, she killed my spirit with faint praise. "Lena is so sensible," she would tell the neighbors when they came over to admire the renovations. "I never have to worry about her. She is so low maintenance." Low maintenance. It sounded like a compliment, but when you are 10 years old, you realize that low maintenance is just a polite way of saying your needs are not a priority. When I fell off my bike and scraped my knee, I didn't run inside crying because I didn't want to be high maintenance. I washed the blood off with the garden hose and put a bandage on it myself. When Marla forgot to pick me up from band practice because she was busy driving Caden to a travel soccer tryout, I didn't complain. I walked 2 miles home in the rain. "Look at you," Marla said when I walked through the door, soaking wet. "So independent. Caden would have had a meltdown. You are such a little adult." She groomed me to be invisible. She trained me to believe that my value lay in how little space I took up, how few resources I consumed. I was the backdrop. Caden was the protagonist. Dad drifted further away. He worked later hours to pay for the renovations and Caden's private coaching. On the rare occasions he was home, he was too tired to notice the subtle warfare happening in his living room. He saw a clean house. He saw a wife who managed the calendar. He saw a daughter who got straight A's and never caused trouble. He thought he had won the lottery. But Grandma Elise saw. She saw the way I hesitated before speaking. She saw the way I flinched when Marla's voice went up an octave. One afternoon, When I was 11, Grandma came over while Marla was out at a salon appointment. She brought a heavy, leather-bound album. "I found these in my attic," Grandma whispered, conspiring with me. "Pictures of your mom's graduation and the trip we took to the Grand Canyon." We sat on the floor of my bedroom, and for an hour, the room felt warm. We laughed at Mom's terrible fashion choices in the 90s. We traced the curve of her smile. Then the front door opened. The click of Marla's heels on the hardwood echoed up the stairs. "Quick," Grandma said, her hands shaking slightly. "Put it under your mattress." We hid the album like it was contraband. When Marla walked into my room a moment later, she sniffed the air, sensing the shift in atmosphere. "Elise," she said, her smile tight. "I didn't see your car." "I parked down the street," Grandma lied. "Didn't want to block the driveway." "We are about to have dinner," Marla said. "It is a family night. Perhaps you should head home before it gets dark." It wasn't a suggestion, it was an eviction. Grandma squeezed my hand, a silent promise that she wasn't giving up, and left. But as I watched her go, I felt a heavy stone settle in my gut. I realized that Grandma was losing. She was fighting a war of memories against a woman who controlled the present. The final seal on my childhood happened a few months later. I was looking for a roll of tape in Marla's bedroom. I wasn't supposed to be in there. The master suite was considered Marla's sanctuary. But I had a school project due, and I was desperate. I opened the top drawer of her vanity. It was filled with velvet boxes and silk scarves. I pushed aside a heavy patterned silk scarf, looking for the tape dispenser. Beneath the silk, tucked in the back corner, was a small, familiar box. It was navy blue velvet, worn at the corners. My breath hitched. I knew that box. It had sat on my mother's dresser for as long as I could remember. I opened it. Inside sat my mother's wedding ring. It was a simple band with a modest diamond, the ring my father had saved for 2 years to buy. After Mom died, Dad had told me he put it in the safety deposit box at the bank. He said he was keeping it safe for me, for when I was old enough to appreciate it. But here it was, in Marla's drawer. It wasn't displayed. She didn't wear it. It was buried under a scarf, locked in the dark. I stared at the ring, and the realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. Marla didn't want the ring. She had her own ring, a flashy 3-carat monster that caught the light from every angle. She didn't keep my mother's ring because it was valuable to her. She kept it so I couldn't have it. She had intercepted it. She had convinced my father that she should be the keeper of the family heirlooms, and then she had buried it. It was an act of possession. It was her way of saying that she owned everything in this house: the furniture, the air, the man, and even the memory of the woman who came before her. I heard the garage door open downstairs. Marla was home. I snapped the box shut and shoved it back under the scarf. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I backed out of the room, empty-handed. That night at dinner, Marla praised me for being so quiet while she told a long, detailed story about Caden's potential as a debate team captain. "Lena is such a good listener," Marla said, patting my hand. I looked at her hand on mine. Her nails were manicured a perfect, bloodless pink. I looked at the ring on her finger, and then I thought about the navy blue box upstairs, buried in the dark. I didn't say anything. I cut my chicken into tiny, precise pieces. But for the first time, my silence wasn't about being low maintenance. It wasn't about being good. I was silent because I was learning. I was learning that Marla was a thief who stole things that couldn't be insured. And I decided, right then and there, that I would wait. I would be quiet. I would be invisible. And I would wait for the day I could take back what was mine. High school was when I learned the physics of my family. In any given room, Marla was the sun, burning bright and demanding gravity. Caden was the planet nearest to her, basking in the warmth, reflecting her light. My father was a moon, caught in their orbit, dragged along by the sheer force of their combined mass. And I was the space debris. I was the dark matter. I was there, necessary for the universe to exist, but invisible to the naked eye. The lesson was never clearer than during the annual production of the Christmas card. This was a military operation Marla began planning in October. By December, we were dressed in coordinating sweaters that scratched my neck, standing in front of the fireplace that was never lit because Marla said soot ruined the drapes. I remember the year I was 15. Marla had set up the tripod and the timer. She positioned herself in the center, seated on the velvet ottoman. Her legs swept to the side like royalty. She pulled Caden down to sit on the floor by her knee, resting a hand affectionately on his shoulder. My father stood behind her, his hand on her other shoulder, completing the triangle of unity. "Lena, sweetie, you manage the remote," Marla said, waving a hand toward the camera. "You are so good with gadgets." So I stood. I stood on the far periphery of the frame, clutching the small black remote control hidden in my palm. I had to lean in to be in the shot, but not too far, or I would block the view of the Christmas tree. "Smile," Marla commanded. Click. In the final print that was mailed to 300 of their closest friends and business associates, the story was told in pixels. There they were, the golden trio, glowing and tight, and there I was, half a step away, my smile tight, my body angled slightly toward the exit. I looked like a neighbor who had wandered in by mistake, or perhaps the hired help who had been graciously invited to join for a second. This became the rhythm of my adolescence. I was the supporting cast. They were the stars. Holidays were performances. Marla would line up Caden's trophies on the sideboard, basketball participation awards, a debate team certificate, a most improved plaque from swim team. She would tour the guests past them, holding her wine glass, beaming. "Caden is just a natural leader," she would say, her voice carrying across the room. "He has such wonderful people skills. He connects. That is what matters in the real world, isn't it? The ability to look someone in the eye and shake their hand." Then, inevitably, a guest would ask about me. "And Lena?" they would ask, looking around. "Where is she?" "Oh, Lena is in her room," Marla would say, her tone dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, as if discussing a mild affliction. "She is reading, again, you know how she is, a total bookworm. She is very self-contained, low maintenance. We hardly know she is in the house most of the time." Low maintenance, the phrase returned, haunting me. To survive, to feel like I earned the oxygen I consumed in that house, I made myself useful. If I could not be loved for my personality, I would be indispensable for my utility. I became the invisible mechanic of the Carver household. When the Wi-Fi router blinked red, Marla didn't call the service provider. She yelled my name. I would come downstairs, silently reset the modem, configure the IP address, and wait for the green light. "There," Marla would say, not looking at me, but at her phone screen. "Finally, thank you, Lena." When the faucet in the guest bathroom started dripping, keeping Caden awake, I was the one who looked up the tutorial online, found Dad's toolbox, and replaced the washer. When the hinge on the pantry cabinet squeaked, I oiled it. I programmed the thermostat. I set up the smart TV. I became the grease in the gears of their perfect life, ensuring that they never had to deal with the friction of reality. I thought, foolishly, that if I fixed enough things, they might realize they needed me. I thought that if I made their lives easier, they might love me for it. I was wrong. They didn't love the mechanic. They just expected the machine to work. My junior year, I entered a regional coding competition. It was a hackathon for high school students across 3 counties. I spent weeks in my room, fueled by energy drinks and the desperate need to build something that was entirely mine. I built a preliminary logic puzzle game, simple but elegant. I won first place. I remember coming home that afternoon, holding the heavy glass trophy and the check for $500. My heart was hammering. This was tangible proof. This was something shiny, just like Caden's basketball trophies. I walked into the kitchen. Marla was chopping vegetables. Dad was at the table, looking through bills. "I won," I said, placing the trophy on the island. Dad looked up, blinking behind his glasses. "You won? That is wonderful. Lena, what is it? First place in the Tri-County Coding Challenge, I said, pride swelling in my chest. Marla stopped chopping. She looked at the trophy, then at me. Her expression wasn't angry, but it was profoundly underwhelming. It was the look one might give a dog that had successfully fetched a stick, mildly impressed, but ultimately indifferent. That is nice, Lena, she said, wiping her hands on a towel. $500? That will go straight into your savings account for college, I assume. I beat seniors, I said, needing her to understand. I beat teams of 3. It is good that you have a hobby, Marla said, turning back to the carrots. Just be careful, sweetie. Real life isn't a screen. You can't code your way through a dinner party. You need to work on your personality, not just your logic. The dismissal was so casual it took the air out of my lungs. 2 weeks later, Caden was sitting on the bench for a varsity basketball game. He wasn't a starter. He wasn't even the 6th man. He was a backup guard who played perhaps 3 minutes a game. The game was 3 hours away in Columbus. We have to leave by 2, Marla announced, packing a cooler of snacks. Traffic will be terrible. I have a physics final tomorrow, I said. I should stay and study. Suit yourself, Marla said, grabbing her keys. Come on, Tom, we don't want to miss warm-ups. Dad looked at me, a flicker of apology in his eyes, and then he grabbed his coat and followed her. They drove 6 hours round trip to watch Caden sit on a bench and high-five his teammates. They hadn't walked 10 minutes to the school auditorium to see me accept my award. My father was not a villain in this story. Not exactly. He was a casualty. He was tired. The sparkle he had when my mother was alive had faded into a dull, gray exhaustion. He wanted peace, and he learned quickly that peace meant agreeing with Marla. But he found a use for me, too. On Sunday nights, he would call me into his home office. Lena, look at this for me, would you? He would ask, pushing a stack of papers across his mahogany desk. My eyes are getting bad. Just check the math on these invoices. I would sit on the floor and organize his receipts. I would reconcile his checkbook. I would file the tax documents that Marla threw in a shoebox. You are a good girl, he would say, sighing as he leaned back in his chair. You are so reliable. Lena, I never have to worry about you. Caden, well, we have to keep an eye on Caden. But you are steady. Reliable, steady, sensible. They sounded like words you would use to describe a Toyota Camry. Not a daughter. I wanted him to say I was brilliant. I wanted him to say I was cherished. I wanted him to look at me the way he looked at Marla, with devotion. Instead, I was his administrative assistant. The only person who saw the color in my world was Grandma Elise. Since she was no longer welcome for long stretches in the house, we created a ritual. Every other Saturday, she would pick me up, and we would go to a diner on the edge of town, a place that smelled of bacon grease and old coffee. Eat, she would command, sliding a plate of waffles toward me. You are too thin. That house is starving you. She wasn't talking about food. I feel like a ghost, Grandma. I confessed one morning, stabbing my fork into a strawberry. I scream and no one hears me. I fix everything and no one sees it. Grandma reached across the chipped laminate table and covered my hand with hers. Her skin was paper thin, but her grip was iron. You are not a ghost. Lena, you are a slumbering volcano, she said, her eyes fierce. You are your mother's daughter. You have her sharp head and her soft heart. That is a dangerous combination. It scares people like Marla. Why does she hate me? I asked, the question I had been holding in for years. She doesn't hate you, Grandma said. She is terrified of you. You are the evidence that a world existed before her. You are the proof that your father loved someone else deeply. She wants to be the only story in the book. Lena, but you are a whole chapter she can't rip out. She squeezed my hand. Get your grades, save your money, dream about a life that is bigger than Lakefield. One day, you will walk out that door and you won't look back. But Marla, with her radar for independence, sensed the threat. I don't know why you spend so much time with her, Marla said casually one evening while I was drying dishes. Elise is sweet, but she is stuck in the past. She lives in a world that doesn't exist anymore. She is my grandmother, I said. Of course, Marla smiled. A shark baring its teeth. But you have a family right here, a new family, a future. Spending all that time looking backward, it isn't healthy. You don't want to end up bitter, do you? Alone and bitter in a small house full of old photos? It was a warning. Be like her, and you will end up like her, alone. The breaking point, the moment the invisible glass wall became visible, was New Year's Eve of my senior year. My father's firm was hosting a massive gala at the Ritz-Carlton in downtown Cleveland. It was a black tie affair. Marla had bought a gold sequined gown that cost more than my first car. Dad rented a tuxedo. Even Caden, who was a freshman in college and home on break, had a suit. It is a great networking opportunity for Caden, Marla explained as she adjusted his bow tie in the hallway. He is studying business. He needs to learn how to work a room. I stood at the top of the stairs, wearing jeans and a sweater. I was 18. I was technically an adult. What time are we leaving? I asked, assuming. Marla looked up, her face perfectly made up, her diamond earrings catching the light. She looked at me with genuine surprise. Oh, Lena, she said, laughing lightly. You aren't coming. But it is the firm's party. Everyone goes. It is $500 a plate, sweetie, Marla said, smoothing Caden's lapel. And honestly, it is going to be very loud. Lots of dancing, lots of socializing. It is really for the adults. And Caden needs the exposure. You would be bored to tears. You hate crowds. I don't hate crowds, I said quietly. Besides, Dad chimed in, checking his watch, avoiding my eyes. Someone needs to stay with the house. We don't want to leave it empty on a holiday. I was the security system. I was the house sitter. I ordered Thai food for you, Marla said, spraying a cloud of perfume. It is on the counter. Relax. Watch a movie. Enjoy the peace and quiet. They swept out the door in a flurry of gold sequins and expensive cologne. The door clicked shut, and the lock engaged. I stood in the silent hallway. The house was perfect. The floors shone. The photos on the wall smiled. I ate cold pad thai straight from the carton standing over the kitchen sink. At 11:55, I turned on the television. The local news was broadcasting live from the Ritz-Carlton ballroom. The camera panned across the crowd. And there they were. I saw them on the screen. Marla was laughing, her head thrown back, holding a champagne flute. Caden was shaking hands with one of the senior partners, looking charming and handsome. My father was standing next to them, smiling that tired, relieved smile. They looked like a perfect family. They looked complete. There was no gap where I should have been. The picture didn't miss me. I watched the countdown clock in the corner of the screen. 10, 9, 8. I looked around the dark, empty living room that I had cleaned. I looked at the Wi-Fi router I had fixed. I looked at the tax files stacked on the desk. 5, 4, 3. I realized then that Grandma was right. I wasn't waiting for them to love me. I was waiting for permission to leave. And they had just given it to me. 2. Happy New Year. On the screen, balloons dropped. My father kissed Marla. Caden hugged a stranger. I stood in the darkness, lit only by the blue glow of the television, and I spoke to the empty room. One day, I whispered, my voice cracking but my resolve hardening like steel. One day I will stand in a room where you cannot lock me out. One day I will build a table, and I will be the one who decides who gets to sit at it. I turned off the TV, plunging the perfect family into darkness, and went upstairs to pack my bags for college. I was done fixing their leaks. It was time to build my own house. The acceptance letter to Ridgeview Tech University did not feel like a piece of paper. It felt like a hacksaw. It was the tool I was going to use to cut the bars of the cage I'd been living in for 9 years. When I placed the envelope on the kitchen island, right next to Marla's vase of fresh hydrangeas. The reaction was immediate and suffocating. "Denver?" Marla asked, reading the letter as if it were a court summons. She looked up at me, her face arranging itself into a mask of wounded concern. "That is more than 1,000 miles away. Lena, why would you want to go so far? Are the schools in Ohio not good enough for you?" "It is one of the best computer engineering programs in the country," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "And I got a full tuition scholarship." "Money isn't everything," my father said, sighing as he took off his reading glasses. He looked older, more worn down. "Family is supposed to stick together. Your brother is going to school 2 hours away. He can come home for laundry on weekends. If you go to Colorado, we will never see you. It feels selfish, Lena, to leave us like that." Selfish. That was the word they pinned to my chest. Leaving was selfish. Wanting a career that Marla did not understand was selfish. Not wanting to be the invisible mechanic in their perfect house was selfish. The send-off was a study in contrast. When Caden left for his state college, Marla threw a backyard barbecue that lasted until 2 in the morning. There were kegs of beer, a catered taco bar, and a banner that said, "Future leader strung between the oak trees." Half the town came to slap him on the back. When I left for Denver 2 weeks later, we had a quiet dinner on a Tuesday night. Marla made a meatloaf that was slightly dry. The conversation revolved around how expensive flights were and how I would probably get altitude sickness. There were no banners. There were no toasts. Just a car packed with boxes and a heavy, lingering silence. Grandma Elise was the only one who broke script. She met me by my car while Dad was inside looking for a road map he insisted I take, even though I had GPS. She pressed a thick white envelope into my hand. "This isn't from me," she whispered, looking over her shoulder at the house. "This is from your mother. She started putting cash in a coffee can in the pantry when you were a baby. She called it her runway fund. She said, 'One day my girl is going to need to fly, and planes cost money.'" I opened the envelope. It contained $2,000 in old soft bills. It wasn't a fortune. It wasn't enough to pay for a dorm room for a semester, but it was everything. It was permission. It was my mother reaching out from 18 years in the past to buy me a ticket out. "Go," Grandma said, gripping my arm. "Don't look back until you are standing on a mountain." I drove west. I drove for 19 hours straight, fueled by gas station coffee and the terrified exhilaration of escape. Denver was not a playground. For the wealthy kids in my dorm, college was a 4-year ski vacation interrupted by occasional exams. They posted photos of themselves on the slopes at Breckenridge or drinking craft beer in Lodo. For me, college was a war of attrition. My scholarship covered tuition, but it didn't cover rent, food, or the high-end laptop I needed to run the heavy code for my classes. So I worked. I found a job monitoring the computer lab in the engineering building from 6 in the evening until midnight. It was quiet, and the supervisor let me do my own coding while I watched the servers. Then, 3 nights a week, I worked the graveyard shift at a 24-hour grocery store, stocking shelves from midnight until 6 in the morning. I lived on frozen burritos that cost 89 cents each. I shared a 2-bedroom apartment with 3 other girls, sleeping on a mattress on the floor of a converted walk-in closet, because my share of the rent was only $300 a month. I was exhausted. I was always cold, but I was free. The idea for the app came during my sophomore year. I was doing a freelance IT gig, fixing a crashed server at a nursing home called Shady Pines to make an extra $100. I was sitting in the nurse's station, waiting for a diagnostic bar to load, watching the head nurse, a woman named Sarah, try to manage the weekly schedule. She was staring at a massive whiteboard covered in red and black marker, rubbing her temples. "Problem?" I asked. Sarah sighed, dropping her marker. "It is a nightmare. 3 people called out sick. The agency sent 2 temps who don't know the patients, and I have 2 caregivers who are into overtime and about to hit burnout. But I can't send them home because I legally have to maintain the staff-to-patient ratio. It is a puzzle with missing pieces, honey." I looked at the board. It was chaos. But as I stared at the names, the the shifts, and the regulations, my brain did what it always did. It reorganized. I saw variables, I saw constraints, I saw a logic problem. "You need an algorithm," I said. "I need a miracle," she replied. "No," I said, pulling out my notebook. "You need a system that tracks hours, certifications, and patient needs in real time, then autofills the gaps with the most qualified person who isn't approaching overtime limits." Sarah looked at me. "Can you build that?" "I don't know," I said. "Maybe." I spent the next 6 months living on 4 hours of sleep a night. I went to my classes. I worked my shifts, and every other spare second. I coded. I wrote the backend in Python during my lab monitor shifts. I designed the interface in my head while I was stocking cans of soup at the grocery store. I called it CareLink. It wasn't pretty. The interface was clunky and gray, but the math underneath was beautiful. It balanced fairness for the workers with safety for the patients. I brought it back to Sarah on a tablet. "Try this," I said. She used it for 2 weeks. When I came back, she hugged me so hard I thought she cracked a rib. "I went home on time every day this week," she told me, tears in her eyes. "And nobody quit. You saved my sanity. Lena." Word spread, not through marketing, but through the underground network of exhausted caregivers. The manager of a facility across town called me. Then a director of a small chain in Boulder emailed me. I was fixing bugs at 3 a.m. I was answering support emails during my calculus lectures. I was a ghost on campus, a girl in a hoodie always typing, always moving. My family had no idea. The phone calls home were infrequent and hollow exercises in distance. "How is school?" Dad would ask. "It is good, hard," I would say. "I am working on a project." "That is nice," he would reply, his interest evaporating instantly. "Marla wants to tell you about Caden." Then Marla would get on the line. "Lena, you will not believe it. Caden pledged the top fraternity. He is practically running the social committee. We went to visit him for homecoming. Oh, the float they built was magnificent. He is just thriving. He has such a gift for bringing people together." "That sounds great," I would say, staring at a line of code that was about to revolutionize how 3 local nursing homes manage their payroll. "You sound tired," Marla would say, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "Are you still working those little jobs? You really should try to enjoy college more. Join a club. Meet people. You don't want to look back and realize you spent your best years staring at a screen." She didn't understand. The screen wasn't isolating me, it was building my armor. The disconnect hit its peak during the Thanksgiving of my junior year. I had flown home because Dad sounded frail on the phone, and guilt is a powerful magnet. The house in Lakefield hadn't changed, but it felt smaller, or maybe I had just gotten bigger. I was sitting in the kitchen, drinking coffee, working on my laptop. I had a deadline. A regional healthcare provider was interested in a beta test, and I needed to patch a security vulnerability before Monday. Marla was in the living room with Mrs. Gable, the neighbor. They were drinking tea. They didn't know I could hear them. "So, how is Lena doing out west?" Mrs. Gable asked. "She is studying computers, right?" "Oh, yes," Marla said. I could hear the dismissive wave of her hand in her tone. "She is always tapping away on that thing. She is doing some little project for a nursing home. I think, fixing their email or something." I stopped typing, fixing their email. "Well, it is good she has a trade," Mrs. Gable said. "I suppose," Marla sighed. "But frankly, I worry. She is so buried in the data she forgets the human element. Caden. Now Caden understands how the world works. He is interning at a marketing firm this summer. He walks into a room and owns it. That is real success. Lena? Lena is just back end. She is the help. She isn't the face. She is the help." I sat there, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. The insult didn't burn the way it used to. It didn't make me want to cry. Instead, it made me cold. It crystallized something in my chest. She saw me as a mechanic. She saw me as the person you call to fix the plumbing so the real people can live their lives. She didn't realize that the mechanic owns the machine. She didn't realize that without the back end, The pretty interface is just a blank screen. I didn't storm into the living room. I didn't confront her. I closed my laptop, packed my bag, and walked into the living room. I have to go, I said. Marla looked up, surprised. Go? Dinner isn't for 3 hours. There is an emergency with the project, I lied. I have to get to the airport. I will change my ticket. Always so busy, Dad grumbled from his armchair. You just got here. Lena, can't the computer wait? No, I said. It can't. I drove to the airport 4 hours early. I sat at the gate, watching the planes take off against the gray Ohio sky. I felt entirely alone. The family I was born into didn't know me, and the family I was building, my code, my users, felt abstract and distant. Then my phone buzzed. It was an email. It was from the regional director of the healthcare provider I had been talking to. Subject: Contract approval. CareLink. Atlas. I opened it. My hands were shaking, not from cold, but from adrenaline. Dear Ms. Carver, we have finished our review of your beta. It is frankly light years ahead of what we are currently using. We would like to roll out CareLink to all 6 of our assisted living facilities in the Denver metro area starting next month. Attached is our standard vendor contract. Please review the compensation terms. We are prepared to offer a licensing fee of $40,000 for the first year, plus a monthly maintenance retainer. I stared at the number. $40,000. That was more money than I had made in 3 years of stocking shelves. That was tuition. That was rent. That was freedom. I looked around the busy airport terminal. I wanted to tell someone. I wanted to call my dad and say, "Look, I am not just fixing emails. I built a company." But I knew what he would say. He would ask if it would interfere with my grades. He would ask if I was still coming home for Christmas. And Marla would ask why I couldn't be more like Caden, who had just gotten an unpaid internship that required a suit. So I didn't call them. Instead, I opened the attachment. I scrolled to the bottom. I typed my name on the signature line. Lena Carver, founder. I whispered the word to myself. Founder. I looked at the reflection of my face in the dark glass of the terminal window. I looked tired. I looked pale. But I looked solid. This isn't for you, Marla, I whispered to the reflection. And it isn't for you, Dad. I thought of the coffee can in the pantry. I thought of Grandma Elise sneaking me strawberry jam. I thought of my mother, who died before she could see me grow up, but who left me the means to leave. This is for us, I said. I hit send. The plane began to board. I stood up, slung my heavy backpack over one shoulder, and walked down the jet bridge. I was leaving Ohio again, but this time I wasn't running away. I was launching. And for the first time in my life, I didn't care if anyone was watching. I knew where I was going, and I knew exactly who was flying the plane. By the time I turned 26, I had stopped waiting for permission to exist. I was too busy building a world where I made the rules. The dorm room logic puzzle had evolved. It was no longer a patch for a single nursing home. It was CareLink Atlas, a comprehensive workforce management platform that integrated scheduling, payroll, and patient acuity metrics. I wasn't coding in a closet anymore. I was standing in a 4,000-square-foot converted warehouse in the River North Art District of Denver. The floors were polished concrete. The ceilings were exposed timber. And the silence here wasn't the silence of being ignored. It was the hum of productivity. I had 2 co-founders now. Ben, a structural engineer I met in a coffee shop who handled the hardware integration, and Sarah, the nurse who had given me my first chance, who now served as our chief clinical officer. We were a lean, hungry team, operating on caffeine and the absolute certainty that the healthcare industry was broken and we were the only ones holding the duct tape. Then the world stopped. March of 2020. The pandemic didn't just knock on the door, it kicked it down. Nursing homes became the front lines of a war no one was prepared to fight. Suddenly, CareLink Atlas wasn't just a convenience tool for managers to avoid overtime, it became critical infrastructure. We built tracking modules overnight to monitor staff exposure rates. We created heat maps for infection vectors within facilities. We built emergency staffing bridges that allowed facilities to share resources when half their shift called out sick. I didn't sleep for 3 months. I lived on protein bars and adrenaline. My phone didn't stop ringing. Lena, the system is holding, Ben told me one morning at 4 o'clock. Looking at the server monitors that were glowing red with traffic, we are processing 3 million shifts a week. If we go down, people literally don't get fed. Patients don't get turned. We won't go down, I said. It wasn't arrogance. It was the same stubbornness that had kept me fixing Marla's Wi-Fi router when I was 12. I knew how to keep the lights on. By the summer, CareLink Atlas was operating in 40 states. We were profitable, wildly, improbably profitable. A tech journalism site called The Daily Venture ran a feature on us. The headline read, "The Silent Architects: How One Denver Startup Saved Senior Care from Collapse." There was a photo of me. I was wearing a black turtleneck, arms crossed, looking directly into the camera. I didn't look like the girl who stood on the edge of the Christmas card. I looked like someone who owned the lens. I sent the link to the family group chat. "Thought you might like to see this." I typed, "We are helping a lot of people." I waited. 3 hours later, Marla posted a photo of Caden. He was on a golf course in Florida, wearing a pastel polo shirt, giving a thumbs up. "Caden broke 80 on the back 9 today," she wrote. "So proud of his focus." That was it. No comment on the article, no acknowledgement that her stepdaughter was being called an innovator in national press. Just a picture of Caden holding a putter. My father didn't reply at all. I turned my phone over on my desk and went back to work. The sting was there, familiar and dull, like an old knee injury that aches when it rains. But it didn't cripple me anymore. I had other metrics for success. A week later, a package arrived at my office in Denver. It was wrapped in brown paper and covered in stamps. Inside was the article. Grandma Elise had printed it out from the library computer on standard copy paper. She had put it in a frame, a gaudy, gold-painted wooden frame that she must have bought at a thrift store. Included was a note, written in her shaky, cursive script. "I took this to bingo night. I told Mrs. Higgins, 'You see this girl? She built this. She didn't marry it. She didn't inherit it. She built it. I am so proud I could burst. Love, Grandma.'" I put the frame on my desk next to my dual monitors. It looked ridiculous against the sleek, modern Apple equipment. It was the most valuable thing in the office. Then the sharks started circling. When you have a SaaS platform with high recurring revenue and a sticky user base, private equity firms smell blood in the water. We started getting inquiries, lunch invitations, vague emails about synergies. In November, a fund based in Chicago put a letter of intent on my desk. They wanted to acquire CareLink Atlas. They offered $80 million. $80 million. I sat in the conference room with Ben and Sarah, staring at the number. It was enough money to disappear. It was enough money to buy Lakefield, Ohio, and burn it to the ground if I wanted to. "We take it, right?" Ben asked, his voice cracking. "Lena, that is retirement money." I looked at the contract. I looked at the clause that said the founders would transition out within 6 months. They wanted to buy the engine, but fire the mechanic. "No," I said. Ben choked on his water. "No? We don't sell the control," I said, my voice flat and hard. "We sell the equity, but we keep the board seats. I stay on as CEO for a minimum of 5 years, and we carve out a pool for the early employees." "They will walk away," Sarah warned. "Let them," I said. "We are the ones saving the nursing homes. They are just money." I negotiated for 3 weeks. I channeled every ounce of Marla's cold manipulation, every bit of her ability to freeze a room, but I used it for business. I was relentless. I was terrifying. In the end, they blinked. We closed the deal for $85 million, with me retaining 15% equity and the CEO chair. The wire transfer hit my account on a Tuesday morning. I refreshed the banking app. I counted the commas. I was 27 years old. I was a multimillionaire. And I was eating a bagel alone in my office. I didn't buy a sports car. I didn't buy a yacht. I bought a plane ticket to Cleveland. I needed a foothold. I wasn't moving back. Denver was my kingdom now. But I needed a presence. I needed to know that if I had to go back, I wouldn't be sleeping in my old twin bed under the gaze of Marla's no-clutter rule. I bought a penthouse in the Flats, a revitalized industrial area of Cleveland. It was a glass box in the sky, overlooking the river and the rusted steel bridges. It was stark, modern, and filled with light. It was 20 minutes from Grandma Elise's small house in Toledo, but 45 minutes from Marla's fortress in the suburbs, a strategic distance. Then I made one more transaction. I contacted Grandma Elise's bank. I pretended to be her financial advisor's assistant. I got the payoff amount for her mortgage, the house she had lived in for 40 years, the one she was constantly worried about losing because her pension was small. It was $62,000. I wrote the check. I sent it with strict instructions to the bank that the source was to remain anonymous. 2 days later, Grandma called me, weeping. "Lena, you won't believe it," she sobbed. "A miracle. The bank sent a letter. The house is paid off. They said it was an administrative adjustment? I don't understand it, but I don't have a mortgage anymore." "That is amazing, Grandma," I said, looking out at the Rocky Mountains from my office window. "You deserve a miracle." "I can breathe," she said. "I can finally breathe." I hung up, feeling a warmth in my chest that no magazine article could give me. This was power. Not the power to control people, like Marla did, but the power to fix things, to protect the people who mattered. I waited for my father to call. Surely, he had heard. The acquisition had been in the business section of the plane dealer. People in his firm would know. He called 3 weeks later. "Lena?" His voice sounded thin, scratching against the receiver. "Hi, Dad," I said, swiveling my chair. "How are you?" "Not great, honey, not great," he coughed. "It is the heart again. The valve is... well, the doctors are saying I need another procedure, a big one." "I am sorry, Dad," I said, and I meant it. I heard the fear in his voice. "The thing is," he hesitated, "we are in a bit of a tight spot. Marla, well, we leveraged the house a bit for Caden's business venture last year. It didn't work out, and the insurance is fighting us on this surgery. They are saying it is experimental." He wasn't calling to say congratulations. He wasn't calling to ask how it felt to sell a company. He was calling because the golden sun had drained the well, and the mechanic was needed to refill it. "How much, Dad?" I asked. "The deposit for the clinic is $25,000, he whispered, the shame evident in his voice. "I wouldn't ask, Lena, but I know you are doing okay with your computer things." "Okay with my computer things." He had no idea. He didn't know I could buy the hospital wing he was staying in. "I will wire it today," I said. "Do you want me to come home?" "Oh, no," he said quickly. "Marla is here. She has it handled. We don't want to disrupt your work. Just, the money would be a help." "Okay, Dad. Take care." I authorized the transfer. $25,000. It was nothing to me now financially, but emotionally, it cost everything. I had just saved his life, or at least his credit rating, and I was still being told to stay away so I wouldn't disrupt Marla's show. The text from Marla came that evening. "Dad told me you covered the deposit. Thanks. I knew you would be fine out there. We will let you know how the surgery goes." I knew you would be fine. Not "thank you for saving us," not "we are proud of you," just a dismissal, as if my success was merely a convenient utility for them to tap into when Caden's ventures failed. They treated my fortune like they treated my ability to fix the Wi-Fi, something they were entitled to, but didn't need to understand. I stood up and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window of my Denver loft. It was night. The city grid was laid out below me, a sprawling map of amber and white lights. I poured myself a glass of expensive whiskey, the kind Dad used to drink only on anniversaries. I looked at the reflection of the room behind me. It was sparse, elegant, mine. "One day," I whispered to the glass, repeating the promise I had made to the empty living room on New Year's Eve years ago. One day I will stand in a place where they cannot lock me out. I took a sip of the whiskey. It burned, hot and clean. I looked at the city lights, at the empire I had built from a laptop and a grudge. I looked at the bank balance on my phone. I looked at the deed to the Cleveland penthouse in my inbox. And I realized, with a jolt that was half triumph and half heartbreak, that I wasn't waiting for that day anymore. I was standing in it. They hadn't locked me out. I had outgrown the room. But as I stared at the dark glass, I knew the story wasn't over. The surgery was coming. The house in Lakefield was still standing, and Marla was still the gatekeeper. I had the money, and I had the power. But I didn't have the closure. And I knew, with the instinct of a programmer spotting a bug in the code, that the system was about to crash. The decline of my father was not a crash, but a slow, agonizing erosion. For the last 6 months of his life, I lived in the space between Denver and Cleveland, existing in a state of suspended animation. My apartment in the flats became a glorified luggage storage unit. My real home was the 4th floor of the cardiac wing at the private clinic in Shaker Heights. I paid for everything. When the insurance company balked at the cost of the private suite with the view of the garden, I wrote a check for $12,000 without blinking. When the specialist from Boston suggested a new experimental medication that wasn't covered, I wired the funds within the hour. I threw money at the problem because it was the only resource I had that Marla could not block. But money could not buy me access to the narrative. In the hospital room, Marla was the director, the producer, and the star. She filled the room with balloons, get-well cards from neighbors I didn't know, and religious icons that my father had never cared about. She sat by his bedside, holding his hand whenever a nurse or doctor walked in, performing the role of the devastated, devoted wife with Oscar-worthy commitment. I sat in the corner, on the uncomfortable vinyl chair, typing on my laptop, running a multi-million-dollar company through a secure VPN while watching my father fade. "He looks peaceful today," Marla whispered one afternoon, smoothing the sheets. She looked at me, her eyes dry and sharp. "It is a shame he has to spend his final days like this. You know, the doctor said stress is a major factor in heart failure." I stopped typing. "Dad has had a bad heart for 10 years. Marla, it is genetic. Genetics pull the gun, but lifestyle pulls the trigger," she said, reciting a phrase she must have read on a wellness blog. She stood up and walked over to me, lowering her voice so the sleeping man in the bed couldn't hear. "He was very lonely after you left. Lena, he never said it, because he didn't want to guilt you. But he felt abandoned. A father needs his daughter. And you were, well, you were very far away." The accusation hung in the air, heavy and toxic. She was rewriting history in real time. She was planting a flag in his deathbed, claiming that his mortality was a direct result of my independence. "I am here now," I said, my voice tight. "I have been here every week." "Yes," Marla sighed, looking at my laptop. "Physically here, but your mind is always on that screen, just like always." I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her that the screen she despised was paying for the roof over her head and the machine beeping next to her husband, but I didn't. I held my tongue because my father stirred, and I didn't want his last memories to be the sound of our warfare. Caden, of course, was nowhere to be found. He was in Florida, supposedly working on a business opportunity that involved selling high-end protein supplements on Instagram. He posted photos of himself on a boat, tanned and smiling, with captions about manifesting abundance and the grind. "Caden is so sensitive," Marla explained to the nurses when they asked where the son was. "He wanted to come, but I told him no. He falls apart when he sees his father like this. He feels things so deeply. He is such a rock for me emotionally. Though, we talk on the phone for hours." The rock was in Miami. The sensitive soul was posting thirst traps while I was emptying bedpans because the night nurse was busy. My father died on a Tuesday morning in November. It was quiet. There were no final words of wisdom, no dramatic reconciliation. 1 minute he was breathing, a shallow, rattling sound, and the next minute the machine let out a long, flat tone that signaled the end of the era. I stood by the window, looking out at the gray parking lot, feeling a strange, hollow numbness. I waited for the grief to hit me, but mostly I just felt tired. I felt like I had been holding my breath for 20 years. Marla wailed. It was a loud, theatrical sound that brought 3 nurses running. She threw herself across his chest. She sobbed about being left alone. She managed to make his death entirely about her loss within 30 seconds. The funeral was held 4 days later. It was a production that Marla had clearly been planning for years. She chose the most expensive casket, the biggest floral arrangements, and a venue that could hold 300 people. She wanted a crowd. She wanted an audience for her widowhood. Caden flew in the night before, tanned and smelling of expensive cologne. He wore a black suit that was tailored a little too tight, looking more like he was going to a club than a funeral. "Hey, sis," he said, giving me a side hug that lasted less than a second. "Rough week, huh? Mom is a wreck. We really need to step up for her." At the service, Marla sat in the front row, flanked by Caden and her sister. I was seated at the end of the pew, separated from them by a gap of 6 inches that felt like 6 miles. When it was time for the eulogies, Marla had arranged the program. Caden spoke first. He walked up to the podium, adjusted the microphone, and spoke for 20 minutes. He talked about how Dad taught him to throw a baseball. A lie. Dad hated baseball. He talked about how Dad was his hero, his mentor, his best friend. He cried at the perfect moments. He charmed the congregation. He painted a picture of a father-son bond that had never existed outside of Marla's Christmas cards. Then Marla spoke. She read a poem. She talked about their love story, editing out the fact that she was the second wife, editing out my mother entirely. I was allowed to speak last. "And finally," the pastor said, checking his notes, "his daughter, Lena." I walked up to the podium. I didn't have notes. I looked out at the sea of faces. People who knew Marla, not my father. I looked at the heavy mahogany casket. "My father liked quiet mornings," I said, my voice steady. "He liked black coffee and the Sunday crossword puzzle. He was a man who wanted peace above all else. I hope he finally has it." I stepped down. It took less than 2 minutes. At the reception afterwards, held at the country club Marla had forced Dad to join, the talk turned instantly to assets. I was standing near the buffet, nursing a glass of sparkling water, when I heard Marla talking to Mrs. Gable and the pastor. "It is going to be so hard to stay in that big house alone," Marla said, dabbing her eyes with a lace handkerchief. "Tom always wanted me to be comfortable, but the maintenance is just too much. I think I might have to sell, downsize, move to a condo in Florida near Caden, start fresh." My stomach dropped. Selling the house wasn't just about moving, it was about liquidation. It was about turning the last physical evidence of my father and my mother into cash that she could take to Miami. I walked over to Grandma Elise, who was sitting in a corner, looking small and frail in her black coat. She hadn't eaten anything. "Did you hear her?" I whispered, kneeling beside her chair. "She wants to sell the house." Grandma looked at me. Her eyes were milky with age, but the sharpness behind them was still there. It was the look of the woman who had sneaked me jam and told me I was a volcano. "She can't," Grandma said. Her voice was barely a scratch. "She can. Grandma, she is the wife. Everything goes to her." "No," Grandma said. She reached out and gripped my wrist. Her fingers were cold. "Listen to me. Lena, I didn't want to say anything while he was alive because he begged me not to cause a war. He was so afraid of her temper. But he wasn't stupid." I leaned in closer. "What are you talking about?" "Your mother," Grandma whispered. "My daughter. She knew, before she died. She knew Tom was weak. She knew he would remarry. She set up a trust. Lena, a supplemental trust." My heart skipped a beat. "I thought Dad dissolved all of that. Marla said they consolidated everything years ago." "Marla tried," Grandma hissed. "She marched him to the bank every week. She made him sign paper after paper. She moved the checking accounts, the savings, the life insurance. She stripped him clean, but she couldn't touch the house. Grandma looked around to make sure no one was listening, then pulled me closer. Your mother's name is still on the deed, hidden in the trust. Half that house belongs to you. It has belonged to you since the day you turned 25. Marla has been living in your house for 3 years without knowing it. I stared at her. The room seemed to tilt. Why didn't you tell me? Because you were building your empire, Grandma said, smiling faintly. And because I wanted you to have this weapon when you were strong enough to use it. Are you strong enough now, Lena? I looked across the room at Marla. She was laughing softly at something the pastor said, her hand resting on Caden's arm. She looked victorious. She thought she had won the long game. She thought she had erased the first wife and the inconvenient daughter. Yes, I said, I am. I left the funeral early. I didn't say goodbye to Marla. I didn't hug Caden. I walked out into the cold Ohio rain, got into my rental car, and drove back to my glass penthouse in the city. For 2 days, there was radio silence. Then, on Friday morning, my phone buzzed. It was a text message from Marla. I opened it. Lena, the lawyer is coming over on Monday to read the will and handle the estate transfer. We are going to keep it very small, just immediate family only. We will handle the paperwork for you and send you a check if there is anything left after debts. You don't need to drive all the way out here. Take care. I stared at the screen. Just immediate family only. There it was, the final severance, the final declaration that I was not, and had never been, part of the inner circle. She was cutting me out of the room where my father's legacy was being decided. She was relegating me to the status of a distant relative who might get a token check in the mail. Something inside me snapped. It wasn't a hot, fiery snap. It was the cold, precise click of a lock engaging. It was the sound of a system coming online. I didn't reply to the text. Instead, I picked up my phone and dialed a number I had saved years ago but never used. Harrison and Partners, Corporate Litigation, a voice answered. This is Lena Carver, I said. I need to speak to the senior partner. I have a probate matter involving a hidden trust, potential fraud, and a 7-figure estate. One moment, Ms. Carver. While I waited on hold, I pulled up another number, a private investigator in Cleveland my co-founder Ben had used during a messy divorce. I need a full asset trace, I told the investigator when he picked up. The name is Marla Carver. I want to know about every bank account, every offshore transfer, and every business loan given to her son Caden in the last 5 years. Dig deep. I want to know what she ate for breakfast in 2019. It will cost you, the investigator grunted. I don't care what it costs, I said. I want it by Sunday night. Then I called Grandma Elise. Get your coat, Grandma, I said. I am sending a car for you on Monday morning. Are we going to the funeral home? She asked. No, I said, looking at the reflection of my eyes in the window. They looked hard. They looked like my mother's eyes. We are going to my father's house. Marla said the reading is for immediate family only. I paused, letting the anger crystallize into pure, cold determination. So I am going to introduce her to the head of the family. I hung up the phone. I looked at Marla's text one last time. Just immediate family only. You are right, Marla, I whispered to the empty room. It is going to be handled by the family, the one you tried to erase. I walked to my closet and pulled out a suit. It was black, sharp, and expensive. It was armor. The grieving daughter was gone. The invisible mechanic was gone. The wolf was awake, and she was coming home to eat. The forensic accountant my lawyer hired was a man named Mr. Henderson. He had the personality of a spreadsheet and the eyes of a shark. We met on a Monday morning in a glass-walled conference room in downtown Cleveland, 3 days after the funeral. Grandma Elise was there, sitting next to me, looking small in the oversized leather chair but clutching her purse like it contained the nuclear codes. Ms. Carver, Henderson said, sliding a thick binder across the mahogany table. Your stepmother has been very busy. I opened the binder. It was an autopsy of my father's finances. We found a pattern, Henderson explained. his voice dry. "Starting about 18 months ago, right around the time your father's heart condition worsened, there were a series of transfers from the joint savings account to a limited liability company called MC Consulting. My father didn't have a consulting business," I said, tracing the lines of numbers with my finger. "He was retired." "Exactly," Henderson said. "The company is registered to a P.O. box in Shaker Heights. The sole signatory is Marla Carver. She was moving money out, $10,000 here, $15,000 there, under the guise of business expenses. In total, she siphoned off nearly $250,000 before he died." "She was looting the ship before it sank," I whispered. "It gets worse." My lawyer, Mr. Vance, interjected. He was a sharp, aggressive litigator I had retained using the funds from the CareLink sale. "She is moving to sell the house. We saw the listing draft online this morning. She wants a quick cash sale. She thinks she holds the title free and clear." Grandma Elise cleared her throat. It was a dry, rattling sound. "She thinks wrong." Mr. Vance nodded. "We pulled the original deed from 1998. When your mother passed, her will was very specific. She didn't leave her half of the house to your father outright. She left it to a trust for your benefit, with your father as the trustee during his lifetime. Upon his death, the trusteeship passes to Elise." I looked at Grandma. "You knew?" "I knew she wrote it," Grandma said softly. "But Marla made so much noise over the years about refinancing and consolidating. I was terrified she had found a loophole. I thought maybe your father signed it away." "He couldn't," Mr. Vance said, smiling a predatory smile. "The trust is irrevocable. Marla owns 50% of that house. You own the other 50%. She cannot sell it without your signature, and she certainly cannot keep the proceeds." "So what do we do?" I asked. "We drop the hammer," Vance said. "We file an emergency injunction to freeze the assets. We file a suit for forensic accounting and potential elder financial abuse regarding the transfers. But we need to serve her." "Don't serve her yet," I said, a plan forming in the cold, logical part of my brain. "Let her think she is safe for one more day. She texted me. She wants to meet tonight. She said she wants to settle things family style." Vance frowned. "I advise against meeting her without counsel. She is volatile." "I know she is volatile," I said, standing up. "That is why I am going to let her prove it." I looked at Grandma. "I need you to do something for me. I need you to call Deputy Miller. Tell him you have concerns about the safety of the estate's assets. Tell him you want a civil standby when we serve the papers." Grandma nodded, her eyes hardening. "I will be ready." I drove to Lakefield at 7 o'clock that evening. The sky was pitch black, and the wind off Lake Erie was howling, rattling the bare branches of the oak trees lining the driveway. The house looked like a fortress. Lights blazed in every window, a desperate attempt to ward off the gloom of the funeral week. Marla's car was in the driveway. Caden's car was gone. He had likely flown back to Miami or was hiding out at a bar, avoiding the messy business of grief. I had a small device in my pocket. It was a high-definition camera disguised as a sleek, modernist paperweight, a black cube with a tiny, almost invisible lens. I had grabbed it from our inventory of monitoring equipment at CareLink. I walked up the steps and rang the bell. Marla opened the door. She was wearing a cream-colored cashmere sweater and black slacks. Her hair was perfect. She looked less like a grieving widow and more like a real estate agent hosting an open house. "Lena," she said, stepping back to let me in. "I am glad you came. It is freezing out there." "Hello, Marla," I said. I walked into the foyer. The house smelled of lemon polish and expensive candles. It was silent. "Come into the living room," she said, gesturing with a manicured hand. "I poured you some Chardonnay. I know you prefer red, but white is all I had open." I followed her. As we passed the bookshelf, I paused. "I just need to set my keys down," I said. I placed my keys on the shelf, and right next to them, I set the black cube. I angled it slightly so it covered the seating area and the hallway. I pressed the tiny button on the back. A microscopic red light blinked once, then vanished. We were rolling. I sat on the edge of the stiff leather sofa. Marla sat opposite me in Dad's favorite armchair, swirling her wine glass. "So," she began, her voice soft and reasonable. "I wanted to talk to you before the lawyers get involved. You know how they are. They charge hundreds of dollars an hour just to argue. I think your father would have wanted us to handle this quietly." "Quietly," I repeated. "Like the way the funeral was handled?" Marla's smile didn't waver, but her eyes tightened. "I did the best I could. Lena, I was grieving. But that is in the past. We need to talk about the future. Specifically, the house." "What about the house?" "It is too big for me," she sighed dramatically. "And the upkeep, well, it is a burden. I have a buyer interested, a cash offer. I want to sell it quickly so we can both move on. I am willing to give you a portion of the proceeds, a gift, say, $10,000? I stared at her. The house was worth at least $800,000. "10,000, I said flatly. "That is the offer." "It is generous, considering," Marla said, taking a sip of wine. "Considering everything I have done, I took care of him, Lena, for years. While you were out playing startup in Denver, I was here changing sheets and managing his medications. I earned this house." "You earned it?" I asked. "Or you stole it?" The air in the room changed instantly. The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Excuse me?" Marla said, lowering her glass. "I know about the transfers." "Marla," I said. My voice was calm, steady, terrified. "I know about MC Consulting. I know you moved $250,000 out of the joint accounts while Dad was dying." Marla froze. Her face went pale, then flushed a deep, angry red. "You have been snooping," she hissed. "That is private business." "It is fraud," I corrected her. "And I know about the house. I know about the supplemental trust my mother set up. You don't own this place. Marla, you own half of it. The other half belongs to me." Marla stood up abruptly. The wine in her glass sloshed over the rim, staining her cream sweater, but she didn't notice. "You lie," she spat. "Your father fixed that. He promised me." "He couldn't fix it," I said, standing up to meet her gaze. "It was irrevocable. You can't sell this house, and you are going to have to answer for the money you took." The mask finally fell. The polite suburban stepmother vanished, replaced by a cornered animal. "You greedy little parasite," she screamed. Her voice echoed off the marble floors, shrill and ugly. "You come back here after years of absence, just sniffing around for a payout? You didn't love him, you left him to rot." "I left because you pushed me out," I yelled back, the composure slipping just a fraction. "I left because you erased me from my own life." "Because you were worthless," she shrieked, stepping closer. "You were a burden, Lena. Always. Your father was relieved when you left. We were happy without you. You were just a shadow hanging over us. A reminder of his mistake with your mother." She was in my face now, her breath smelling of wine and venom. "I am taking this house," she growled. "I am selling it, and I am taking every dime. And you are going to go back to your sad little apartment and rot." "No," I said quietly. "I am not." I turned to walk away, to leave the room now that I had the confession on tape. She grabbed me. Her fingers dug into my wrist, sharp and painful. She yanked me back with surprising strength. "Don't you walk away from me," she screamed. She shoved me, hard. I stumbled back, my boots slipping on the polished floor. My shoulders slammed into the china cabinet. The glass rattled violently. I looked up, shocked. "Marla, don't—" "You think you can fight me?" she yelled, her eyes wide and manic. "You think you are someone? You are nothing." She swung her hand. Crack! Her palm connected with my cheek. It was a stinging, brutal slap that snapped my head to the side. My ear rang. I tasted blood where my tooth cut into my lip. I stood there, stunned, my hand going to my face. She had crossed the line. She had finally done the one thing she had restrained herself from doing for 20 years. Marla was panting, her chest heaving. She didn't look sorry. She looked triumphant. She looked like she wanted to do it again. She grabbed my shoulders, her nails digging into the fabric of my coat, shaking me. "You listen to me," she hissed, her face inches from mine. "You are going to sign those papers. You are going to waive your rights, because if you don't, I will ruin you. I will tell everyone you abused him. I will drag your name through the mud until you have nothing." She let go of me with a final shove. "Look around. Lena," she sneered, gesturing to the empty, silent house. "Who is going to stop me? Who is going to take your side? No one stands with you. No one cares about you. You are alone. You have always been alone." My cheek throbbed. My heart hammered against my ribs. But as her words hung in the air, "No one cares," I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. Because I knew something she didn't. I glanced over her shoulder at the bookshelf. The tiny red light on the black cube blinked once. And then, cutting through the silence like a judge's gavel, the doorbell rang. Ding dong. It was loud. It was insistent. Marla flinched as if she had been slapped. She spun around, staring at the front door. The color drained from her face. "Who is that?" she whispered, panic replacing the rage. "I don't know," I lied, my voice steady. "Maybe you should answer it." "Fix yourself," she hissed at me, frantically smoothing her hair, wiping the spittle from the corner of her mouth. "Don't you dare say a word. If you say anything, I swear to God, Lena." She marched to the door, composing herself with terrifying speed. She put on the smile. She unlocked the deadbolt. She opened the door. And there, standing in the cold night air, was not a neighbor with a casserole. It was Grandma Elise, clutching a thick manila envelope, looking like an avenging angel in a wool coat, and standing right next to her, with his hand resting on his utility belt, was Deputy Miller. The floorboards creaked as Grandma stepped over the threshold without waiting for an invite. Marla stepped back, confused. "Elise? Deputy? We were just having a family discussion." Grandma didn't look at her. She looked at me. She saw the bright red welt blooming on my cheek. She saw the blood on my lip. The air in the hallway froze. Grandma turned to Marla. She didn't scream. She didn't yell. She just spoke, her voice clear and heavy with the weight of 20 years of silence ending. "You told her no one cared," Grandma said. Marla stammered. I don't know what you mean." Grandma stepped closer, holding up the envelope. "If no one cared, Marla," she said, "then I wouldn't be standing here with the deed to this house, the trust documents, and the police." Marla looked at the deputy, then back at me, and for the first time, she realized the trap hadn't snapped shut on me. It had snapped shut on her. The silence in the hallway was absolute, broken only by the sound of the wind whistling through the open door and the frantic, shallow breathing of my stepmother. Marla stood frozen, her hand still raised slightly in the air. The ghost of the slap she had just delivered hanging between us. Her eyes darted from me to Grandma Elise, and then to the badge on Deputy Miller's chest. For the first time in my life, I saw the calculations in her head failing. She could not charm her way out of this. She could not organize or decorate her way out of this. Deputy Miller stepped fully into the foyer, his boots heavy on the marble. He reached up and tapped the center of his chest. "Ma'am," he said, his voice flat and professional, "I am recording now." Marla lowered her hand slowly. She tried to smile, but it looked like a rictus of panic. "Officer, this is a misunderstanding. My stepdaughter and I were having a disagreement. Emotions are high. We just buried my husband." Grandma Elise did not blink. She walked past Marla as if she were a piece of furniture and came to stand next to me. She reached up and touched my cheek, her fingers cool and gentle against the burning skin. "She hit you," Grandma said. It wasn't a question. "Yes," I said. My voice was steady, anchored by her presence. "She slipped," Marla interjected, her voice pitching higher. "She stumbled into the cabinet. I tried to catch her. Lena, tell them you fell." I looked at Marla. I looked at the woman who had spent 2 decades telling me I was invisible. that I was worthless, that I was alone. I didn't fall, I said clearly. You shoved me, and then you slapped me. Marla's eyes widened with fury, but before she could speak, Grandma turned to face her. Grandma held up the thick manila envelope she was clutching. You told her no one cared, Grandma repeated, her voice cutting through the room like a scalpel. I heard you scream it from the porch. Marla swallowed hard. I was upset. I didn't mean it. If no one cared, Marla, Grandma said, stepping forward, forcing Marla to give ground. Then I would not be standing here with the deed to this house, the trust documents, and the law in my hands. The words landed like physical blows. Marla blinked, looking at the envelope. What are you talking about? Marla whispered. The deed is in Tom's name, and mine. Wrong, Grandma said. She pulled a sheaf of papers from the envelope. My daughter left her share of this house to a trust, the Elise Vance Trust. I am the trustee. Lena is the beneficiary. Tom had a life estate, meaning he could live here until he died, but now that he is gone, half of this house belongs to Lena, and as the trustee, I am freezing this asset effective immediately. Marla shook her head. No, Tom fixed that. He told me he fixed it. He lied to keep the peace, Grandma said. Or maybe you just heard what you wanted to hear. But the law doesn't care about your conversations. Marla, it cares about signatures, and I have them all right here. Deputy Miller stepped forward. Mrs. Carver, we received a call from Ms. Vance requesting a civil standby. She expressed concern that there might be an illegal attempt to liquidate estate assets and a potential for conflict. Based on what I walked into, her concerns seem valid. This is harassment, Marla shrieked, pivoting to the victim role she played so well. She looked at the deputy, tears springing to her eyes on command. I am a grieving widow. My husband has been in the ground for 3 days, and these vultures are attacking me in my own home. Officer, I want them removed. They are trespassing. We are not trespassing, I said. I am a partial owner of this property. I have every right to be here. You are a liar! Marla lunged toward me, her finger pointing at my face. You are just a greedy little... Step back, ma'am, Deputy Miller said, his hand moving slightly on his belt. It was a subtle warning, but effective. Marla froze. I want to file a complaint, Marla hissed, smoothing her sweater. She assaulted me. She broke into my house and threatened me. I was defending myself. I almost laughed. It was so predictable. Darvo, deny, attack, and reverse victim and offender. It was Marla's playbook. Actually, I said, reaching into my pocket, that is going to be difficult to prove. I walked over to the bookshelf. Marla watched me, confused. I picked up the small black cube. The tiny red light was still blinking. What is that? Marla asked. It is a camera, I said. High definition, wide angle. It has been recording for the last 20 minutes. Marla's face went the color of old ash. She looked at the cube, then back at me. She replayed the last 10 minutes in her head. The insults, the admission of fraud, the shove, the slap, the scream that no one cared. You can't do that, she stammered. That is illegal. You can't record me in my own house. Ohio is a one-party consent state for audio, I said, reciting the law I had checked with Mr. Vance 3 hours ago. And since I am a legal owner of this property, I am allowed to install security devices in common areas. You are on tape, Marla? All of it. I handed the device to Deputy Miller. Officer, I would like to submit this as evidence, I said. I want to press charges for assault. Deputy Miller took the camera. He looked at Marla. His expression was not sympathetic. Assault is a serious charge, Mrs. Carver, he said, and based on the mark on Ms. Carver's face, we have probable cause. I could arrest you right now. Marla gasped. Arrest me? I am a respected member of this community. I am on the library board. The law doesn't care about the library board, the deputy said dryly. And frankly, Telling a young woman that no one cares while you are hitting her doesn't play well with a jury. Marla collapsed onto the sofa. It wasn't a faint. It was a tactical retreat. She buried her face in her hands and began to sob. "I am all alone," she wailed. "Tom is gone, and everyone is turning against me. I just wanted to protect his legacy. I just wanted to simplify things." "Simplify things by stealing $250,000? Grandma asked. Marla's head snapped up. "I didn't steal anything. That was for expenses." "We have the bank records, Marla," I said. "MC Consulting. The transfer started 18 months ago. You were draining him while he was dying." "He wanted me to have it," Marla screamed. "He knew you would come for everything. He said, 'Marla, take care of yourself, because Lena is cold.' He said that." "He did not," Grandma said. She walked to the coffee table and slapped a single sheet of paper down on the marble surface. "Read it," Grandma commanded. Marla looked at the paper. She didn't want to, but she couldn't look away. "What is this?" Marla whispered. "It is an addendum to his will," Grandma said. "He signed it 6 months ago. He called me to the hospital when you were out getting your hair done. He had his lawyer draft it privately." I looked at the paper too. I hadn't seen this one. Grandma had held it back until this exact moment. It was my father's signature, weak, shaky, but unmistakable. To my daughter, Lena. The document read, "I know I have not always been the father you deserved. I was weak when I should have been strong. But I'm not blind. I know you paid for the clinic. I know you paid for the surgery. I know you paid off your grandmother's house." I looked up at Grandma, tears stinging my eyes. She knew. She had known the whole time that I paid off her mortgage. I looked back at the paper. "Marla will try to rewrite this. She will try to say you abandoned us. But I am signing this to ensure she cannot take the one thing your mother left you. I hereby reaffirm the validity of the Elise Vance Trust. My daughter will not lose her home just because someone else wants to rearrange her life. This house is her shield. Let her keep it." Marla read the words. Her lips moved silently. He went behind my back," she whispered. "I was his wife." "And he was afraid of you," Grandma said. "He was afraid of your anger. He was afraid you would leave him if he stood up to you. So he did the only thing he could. He protected Lena on paper because he couldn't do it in person." Marla stared at the paper, the narrative she had built, the story where she was the saint and I was the villain, dissolved into dust. My father hadn't hated me. He had been a hostage. And in his final months, he had slipped a key through the bars. "So here is how this is going to end tonight," I said. The trembling in my hands had stopped. I felt 10 feet tall. I pulled a document from my own bag. Mr. Vance had drafted it that afternoon. "This is a stipulation," I said, placing it next to Dad's letter. "It says that you agree to freeze all assets of the estate immediately. You agree that you will not list the house, you will not remove any property, and you will not touch the bank accounts until the forensic audit is complete." "I won't sign that," Marla spat. "I need a lawyer." "You can get a lawyer," I said. "But if you don't sign this tonight, Deputy Miller is going to take you to the station for assault, and tomorrow morning, my lawyer will file the civil suit for fraud and elder abuse, and we will leak the video of you hitting me to every news station in Cleveland. Imagine what the library board will think then." Marla looked at the deputy. He didn't move. He just looked at her, waiting. She looked at the camera in the deputy's hand. She looked at Grandma, who was glaring at her with the fire of 1,000 suns. And finally, she looked at me. She didn't see the 9-year-old girl she had bullied. She didn't see the teenager she had ignored. She saw the CEO of a multi-million-dollar company who had just outmaneuvered her in her own living room. For the first time ever, I saw fear in her eyes. Real, visceral fear. She realized that I wasn't just Lena the mechanic. I was Lena the architect, and I had just designed her cage. "Give me the pen," she whispered. Her hand shook violently as she took the pen. She signed the document. It was a jagged, ugly scrawl. "Deputy Miller, will you witness this?" I asked. Yes, ma'am, he said. He signed his name below hers. I took the paper. I folded it neatly and put it in my pocket. You have until tomorrow to pack a bag, I said. You can stay here until the court date, but you sleep in the guest room. This is my house now, and I am installing new locks on the master bedroom door in the morning. You can't kick me out of my room, Marla cried. It is not your room, Grandma said. It was my daughter's room, and now it is part of the estate investigation. Get out of my sight, Marla hissed, standing up and retreating toward the stairs. She looked small. She looked old. The golden light that had always seemed to follow her had vanished. Good night, Marla, I said. She didn't answer. She ran up the stairs, and a moment later, a door slammed. The silence returned to the hallway, but this time, it wasn't heavy. It was clean. Grandma turned to me. She looked tired, but her smile was radiant. She reached out and hugged me, burying her face in my shoulder. You did it, she whispered. You stood up. We did it, I said, holding her tight. I looked at Deputy Miller. Thank you, officer. Just doing my job, Ms. Carver, he said, touching the brim of his hat. I will file the report and log the evidence. If you need anything else, you call. He walked out into the night, closing the door behind him. I stood there in the foyer of the house that had hated me for 20 years. I looked at the spot on the floor where I had fallen. I looked at the china cabinet. I looked at the photos on the wall, the shrine to a fake family. Grandma, I said softly. Yes, honey? Tomorrow, I said, looking at the large portrait of Marla and Dad hanging over the fireplace. We are going to do some redecorating. Grandma laughed. It was a joyous sound that chased the shadows into the corners. I will bring the hammer, she said. The legal dismantling of Marla's empire was not loud. It did not happen with a bang or a scream in a crowded courtroom. It happened in a quiet room with fluorescent lighting and the soft, rhythmic clicking of a stenographer's keyboard. 3 weeks after the incident in the hallway, the probate judge issued a summary judgment. The forensic audit was damning. It showed a clear, undeniable trail of funds moving from my father's accounts into shell companies controlled by Marla. The consulting fees, the business loans, the miscellaneous expenses, it all added up to nearly $300,000 of misappropriated assets. The judge upheld the validity of the Elise Vance Trust without hesitation. The supplemental trust my mother had created 20 years ago was deemed ironclad. I sat at the defense table next to Mr. Vance, wearing a navy suit that cost more than Marla's car. Across the aisle, Marla sat alone. Her lawyer had resigned 2 days ago when the extent of the fraud became clear, leaving her with a court-appointed representative who looked bored. The court finds that half of the property located in Lakefield belongs to the trust, the judge said, peering over his glasses. Furthermore, given the evidence of financial malfeasance, the court grants Ms. Lina Carver the option to buy out the remaining interest in the property at fair market value, minus the sum of the misappropriated funds. Marla slumped in her chair. It was the physical posture of a woman watching her future evaporate. But the real knife twist didn't come from the judge. It came from Caden. 2 days before the final ruling, my stepbrother had requested a meeting. He didn't want to meet at the house. He asked to meet at a Starbucks halfway between Lakefield and the airport. I walked in to find him sitting at a small round table, nervously shredding a napkin. He looked tired. The Florida tan was fading, leaving his skin sallow. Hey, Lena, he said, standing up to offer a handshake that was limp and sweaty. Thanks for coming. I didn't sit down immediately. I stood over him, holding my coffee. What do you want, Caden? He looked down at his shoes. I wanted you to know that I am stepping back from from Marla. I am going back to Miami tonight. You are leaving her? I asked. She is facing criminal charges for fraud. She is losing the house. Yeah, well, Caden said, finally looking at me with eyes that were desperate and shifting. I can't be dragged into that. Lena, I have investors for my new supplement line. If my name gets attached to an elder abuse case, It would kill my brand. You understand business. You know how it is. I stared at him. He was speaking to me as if we were peers, as if we were fellow sharks navigating the same waters. Did you know? I asked. Know what? Did you know she was stealing from Dad to fund your investments? Caden flinched. He looked around the coffee shop to make sure no one was listening. I knew she was helping me out, he muttered. I didn't ask where the money came from. I had a feeling she was moving things around. She always told me, "Don't worry about the details. Caden, I am handling it," so I let her handle it. You let her steal, I said coldly. You let her gaslight Dad. You let her treat me like garbage because it was profitable for you. I was a kid, mostly, he pleaded. And then, look, Lena, she is terrifying. You know how she is. You don't say no to Marla. I was just trying to survive her. Same as you. We are not the same, I said. I survived her by building something. You survived her by becoming an accomplice. He reached out, trying to touch my arm. Look, I just want to make sure we are cool, right? You aren't going to sue me for the money she gave me? I spent it on inventory. I don't have it. That was it. He wasn't apologizing. He was securing his perimeter. Go back to Miami, Caden, I said, stepping back. I won't sue you, but don't ever call me your sister again. We are done. I walked out of the coffee shop, leaving him there with his shredded napkin and his cowardice. It was a quiet victory, but it felt like shedding a heavy skin. The buyout was swift. I used a fraction of the capital from the CareLink Atlas sale to cut a check for Marla's share of the house. It was an insulting amount after the deductions for the stolen money and the legal fees, but she had no choice. She had to sign. Mr. Vance added a clause to the settlement that I insisted on personally. It was a non-disparagement agreement. It stated that Marla Carver was permanently forbidden from speaking about me, my grandmother, or my business in any public forum, social media platform, or press outlet. If she violated it, she would owe me $50,000 per infraction. She signed it with a shaking hand. It was a muzzle. I had bought her silence. The day she moved out was a gray, overcast Tuesday. I sat in my rental car at the end of the driveway, watching. I didn't get out. I didn't want to gloat. I just wanted to witness. A budget-moving truck was parked in the driveway. Marla was directing two bored-looking teenagers in jumpsuits. She looked smaller than I remembered. Without the backdrop of the house she had curated, she was just a middle-aged woman in a coat that was slightly out of fashion, struggling with boxes. She brought out the Ladro figurines. She brought out the silk cushions. She brought out the portrait of herself that used to hang over the mantel. When the last box was loaded, she paused. She looked up at the house. She looked at the windows where she had hung the gray blinds to block out the sun. She looked at the garden she had manicured into submission. Then she saw me. She saw my car parked on the street. She froze. I rolled down the window. She walked down the driveway, her heels clicking on the asphalt. She stopped 3 feet from my car door. Her face was a mixture of hatred and exhaustion. "You think you won," she said, her voice raspy. "But you will never be happy in there. It is too big for you. It is a mausoleum. You are just going to be alone in the dark, just like you were when you were a child." I looked at her. I didn't feel anger anymore. I felt pity. "I won't be alone, Marla," I said softly. "And neither will you. You have your memories. I hope they keep you warm." I rolled up the window. She stood there for a moment longer, staring at her own reflection in the tinted glass, and then she turned around, got into her sedan, and drove away. She didn't look back. I waited until her taillights disappeared around the corner. Then, and only then, did I drive up the driveway. Grandma Elise met me at the front door. She had a bucket of soapy water and a bottle of sage. "Is she gone?" Grandma asked. "She is gone," I said. We walked through the house together. It echoed. The floors were bare. The walls where the photos of Caden and Marla had hung were marked with pale squares where the paint hadn't faded. "It smells like her perfume," Grandma said, wrinkling her nose. "We will open the windows," I said. We will scrub the floors. We will paint. We spent the next week purging the house. It was a ritual. We hired a crew to rip up the beige carpets Marla had installed in the bedrooms, revealing the original hardwood underneath. Scuffed, imperfect, and warm. We took down the gray blinds and let the sunlight pour in. We found a few things Marla had missed or been too lazy to throw out. In the back of the attic, under a tarp, we found my mother's old rocking chair. We found a box of my childhood books. We found the ceramic vase Mom made, chipped but whole. We put them in the center of the living room. Everything else, the custom drapes, the chandelier Marla loved, the marble statues in the garden, I donated to a charity shop in the next county. I wanted the house to forget her. But as I stood in the empty foyer one evening, looking at the space where the camera had been, I realized I couldn't live here. "It is not my home," I told Grandma. "Not anymore. I have my life in Cleveland. I have my loft. This place is a wound that healed over." "So, do we sell it?" Grandma asked. "The market is good." "No," I said, an idea taking shape in my mind, an idea that felt like the final piece of the code I had been writing my whole life. "We don't sell it. We use it. Marla used this house to isolate people. She used it to make me feel small. I want to use it to do the opposite." I called Sarah, my co-founder at CareLink Atlas. "Sarah," I said, "I have a property, 5 bedrooms, large kitchen, secure grounds. It is in a safe, quiet suburb. I want to turn it into a transitional housing unit." "For who?" Sarah asked. "For women," I said. "Women who are leaving controlling relationships. Women who are trying to get back into the workforce but need a bridge. Women who have been told they are worthless and need a place to remember they are not." We set it up within 2 months. We didn't call it a shelter. We called it the sanctuary. I used my own money to renovate it. We painted the walls warm, vibrant colors, yellows, soft greens, terracottas. We filled the kitchen with high-end appliances, not because it was impressive, but because I wanted the women cooking there to feel valued. We turned the dining room, the room where I had been ignored for 20 years, into a communal space with a massive oak table that could seat 12 people. I integrated it with CareLink. The women who lived there were offered training in healthcare administration and guaranteed job placement through our network if they wanted it. It was a full circle. The local news station picked up the story 3 months later. The segment aired on the 6 o'clock news. The headline read, "Local tech entrepreneur transforms inherited estate into haven for fresh starts." The reporter stood on the sidewalk in front of the house. Behind her, the windows were glowing with warm light. You could see silhouettes of people moving inside, cooking, talking, living. Lena Carver, the CEO of the Denver-based software giant CareLink Atlas, has returned to her roots in Lakefield with a unique project, the reporter said. Instead of selling the family estate, Carver has repurposed the luxury home into a free transitional residence for women rebuilding their lives after domestic trauma. They interviewed Sarah. They interviewed a woman named Maria, one of the first residents, whose face was blurred for safety. "I thought I had nowhere to go," Maria said, her voice breaking. "I was told no one would want me, but then I came here, and the first thing I saw was a plaque in the hallway that said, 'You are welcome here.' It changed everything." Marla's name was never mentioned, not once. She was completely erased from the narrative of the house. The reporter talked about my mother, the original owner. She talked about my father's legacy of kindness, a polite fiction I allowed to stand, but Marla simply ceased to exist in the history of the address. The grand opening was a private affair. No politicians, no press, just the residents, the staff, Grandma Elise, and me. We gathered in the living room. The fireplace, which Marla had never used, was roaring with a crackling fire. The smell of cinnamon and roasting chicken drifted from the kitchen, the smell of my childhood returning. Grandma Elise stood by the fireplace. She was wearing her best dress and the pearl necklace my grandfather had given her 50 years ago. She held a glass of sparkling cider. She tapped her glass with a spoon. The room went quiet. 12 women looked at her. Women with bruises on their souls. women who were just starting to believe they could breathe again. "This house," Grandma began, her voice trembling slightly but gaining strength with every word. "This house has a long memory. For a long time. It was a place that taught my granddaughter that she didn't matter. It taught her to be quiet. It taught her to be invisible." She looked at me across the room. I was leaning against the doorframe, wearing jeans and a sweater, feeling more at home than I ever had in my life. "But a house is just wood and stone until you put a heart in it," Grandma continued. "Lena took the pain this house gave her, and she turned it into fuel. She didn't burn it down. She opened the doors. Now, this house stands as proof that not only does she matter, but she matters enough to save others. She matters enough to make sure that no one who walks through these doors ever feels alone again." There were tears, there was applause, but mostly, there was a feeling of heavy, oppressive weight lifting off the foundation. Later that night, after the dishes were done and the house was quiet, I stepped out onto the front porch. It was crisp and cold, a typical Ohio autumn night. I sat on the top step, the same step where I used to sit waiting for Marla to unlock the door when I came home from school, the same step where I had hidden from her parties. I wrapped my cardigan tighter around myself. A taxi pulled up to the curb. The back door opened, and a young woman stepped out. She looked terrified. She was clutching a single, battered suitcase. She looked up at the house, intimidated by its size, by the lights, by the fear of the unknown. She hesitated at the bottom of the walkway. She looked ready to run. I stood up. I didn't hide. I didn't retreat. I walked down the steps, my boots crunching on the autumn leaves. I stopped a few feet away from her. I saw the look in her eyes, the look of someone who expects to be turned away. The look of someone who has been told, "No one cares," so many times they have started to believe it. I smiled. It wasn't a polite smile. It was a real one. "Hi," I said, reaching out my hand to take her suitcase. "I'm Lena. We have been waiting for you." The woman blinked, surprised. "You have?" "Yes," I said, gesturing toward the warm, glowing door of the house that was finally, truly mine. "Come inside. Dinner is hot, and you are right on time." She let out a breath she seemed to have been holding for years. She handed me her bag, and together, we walked up the steps, not as burdens, not as ghosts, but as the owners of our own lives. 1 year later, the view from my balcony was very different from the view I had stared at on the television screen during that lonely New Year's Eve of my senior year. I was not looking at a pixelated ball drop in New York City while eating cold takeout. I was standing 20 stories up in the air, encased in the glass walls of my apartment in the Flats, looking down at the Cuyahoga River as it wound through Cleveland like a ribbon of dark steel reflecting the city lights. The air inside the apartment smelled of roasted garlic, expensive champagne, and something I had not smelled in this city for a very long time: belonging. My grandmother, Elise, was sitting in the best chair by the floor-to-ceiling window. She looked frailer than she had the night we confronted Marla. The fight for the house had taken a toll on her reserves, but her eyes were still sharp, bright with mischief and pride as she watched the room. She was wrapped in a soft cashmere shawl I had bought her, a deep emerald green that matched the dress she wore. Around her, the room was full. There was Sarah, my co-founder, laughing loudly at a joke Ben was telling. There was Maria, the first resident of the sanctuary, who had just landed a job as an administrative assistant at a local hospital. There was the head nurse from Shady Pines, the woman who had given me my first shot with the app. I looked at the bookshelf against the far wall. Sitting there, nestled between a framed copy of my first patent and a stack of art books, was the small black cube, the camera. It wasn't hiding anymore. It wasn't blinking a menacing red in the shadows to catch a thief. It was turned off. The footage of Marla hitting me, the evidence that had dismantled her life, was locked away on an encrypted drive in a safety deposit box. It existed only as insurance, a cold, hard fact stored in the dark so I could live in the light. Now, the camera was just an object, a paperweight, A reminder that truth is a weapon you only have to fire once if your aim is true. You look like you are plotting a merger, a voice croaked softly. I turned. Grandma Elise was watching me. I walked over and sat on the ottoman at her feet, resting my hand on her knee. Just thinking, I said. About her? Grandma asked. She didn't say the name. We rarely said Marla's name anymore. It felt unnecessary, like talking about a storm that had passed 2 seasons ago. A little, I admitted. I was thinking about how quiet it is. The victory. I mean, it wasn't loud. I didn't drag her through the streets. I didn't ruin her in the papers. I just stopped her. Grandma nodded slowly, her fingers tracing the pattern on the shawl. Do you regret it? Do you wish you had made it hurt more? Do you wish you had let me slap her back? I thought about it. I thought about the rage that had burned in my stomach for 20 years. I thought about the little girl who had been told she was low maintenance, the teenager who had been told she was the help, the woman who had been told no one cared. No, I said, and I was surprised to find that I meant it. Making her suffer publicly would have meant I still cared about her opinion. It would have meant I needed the audience she always craved. But I don't. The victory wasn't humiliating her. Grandma, the victory was taking away her power to decide who I am. She said no one cared about me. I didn't need to prove her wrong to the world. I just needed to prove her wrong to myself. Grandma smiled. It was a beautiful, crinkled expression that lit up her whole face. You grew up, Lena. You grew taller than the weeds. My phone buzzed in the pocket of my silk trousers. I pulled it out, expecting a server alert or a Happy New Year text from a vendor. It was an email. The sender was Caden. I hesitated. I hadn't spoken to him since the coffee shop. I tapped the screen. Subject: Happy New Year. Hey Lena. I know I don't have the right to ask for a reply, and I am not asking for one. I just wanted to say, Happy New Year. I am working as a shift manager at a logistics company in Orlando. It is not glamorous, and I'm not posting about it on Instagram, but it is real work. I am paying my own rent. I wanted to thank you. You could have destroyed me along with her. You could have sued me for the money. You didn't. I appreciate that more than I can say. I am seeing a therapist. We talk a lot about what it means to be the golden child, and how that is just another kind of prison. I am sorry I didn't look out of my cell to see that you were in one too. I hope you are happy. You deserve to be. Caden. I stared at the screen. It wasn't a full redemption. It didn't erase the years of complicity, but it was human. It was the first honest thing Caden had ever said to me. Marla was alone in her condo, presumably still telling herself she was the victim, but her son was slowly waking up. That was enough. Everything okay? Grandma asked. Yeah, I said, sliding the phone back into my pocket. Just a ghost saying goodbye. It is almost midnight, Sarah called out from the kitchen, popping the cork on another bottle of champagne. 5 minutes. People, get your glasses. Grandma Elise shifted in her chair. Help me up, Lena. I want to see the city. I took her arm and helped her stand. She was light, fragile as a bird, but she stood straight. We walked to the sliding glass door and stepped out onto the balcony. The cold air hit us instantly, crisp and biting, straight off the lake, but it didn't feel like the cold of that empty house in Lakefield. It felt bracing. It felt alive. Below us, Cleveland was buzzing. Car horns were honking. People were gathering in the streets. Grandma reached into the pocket of her dress and pulled out a small white envelope. I have been saving this, she said, her voice fighting the wind. I took it from the house the day we cleaned it out. I found it in that box in the attic where we found the vase, but I think Marla had hidden it there after she took it from the drawer. My heart hammered. I knew what it was before she opened it. She poured the contents into her shaking palm. It was my mother's wedding ring, the simple gold band with the modest diamond, the ring I had seen locked in Marla's vanity when I was a child, the ring that represented the love Marla had tried to erase. It belongs to you, Grandma said, not because you are getting married, but because you are the daughter she loved. She handed me the ring. It was cold metal, but it burned my skin with memory. There was a small scrap of paper folded inside the envelope. "Read it," Grandma said. "I wrote it for you." I unfolded the paper. In Grandma's shaky script, there were 2 sentences. "You were never hard to love, Lena. They just didn't know how." The tears came then. They didn't fall from sadness. They fell from relief. For 20 years. A part of me had wondered if Marla was right, if I was too quiet, too serious, too low maintenance to be cherished, if I was defective. Grandma's note cut the last string of that lie. It wasn't my defect. It was their incapacity. I didn't put the ring on my finger. Instead, I took off the silver chain I wore around my neck. I threaded the ring onto the chain, letting it slide down to rest against my heart. "Thank you," I whispered, hugging her. "For everything, for the jam, for the camera, for standing in the hallway. Thank you for fighting," she whispered back. Inside, the countdown began. 10. I looked at the people in my living room. Sarah, who had believed in my code when it was nothing. Maria, who was rebuilding her life in the house I had reclaimed. 9. I thought of my father. I hoped, wherever he was, he knew that I had saved his legacy by disobeying him. I hoped he finally had his peace. 8. I thought of Marla. I pictured her in a silent room, surrounded by her perfect things, with no audience to applaud her. I felt a final release. I didn't hate her. I just didn't need her. 7. I looked at the city lights. I had promised myself I would stand here. I had promised the darkness of my childhood bedroom that I would make it to the light. 6. No one cares. That was the weapon. 5. I care. That was the shield. 4. I looked at Grandma Elise, smiling at the sky. 3. I put my hand over the ring on my chest. 2. I took a deep breath of the freezing, wonderful air. 1. Happy New Year. Fireworks exploded over the lake, blooming in massive flowers of red, gold, and green. The sound boomed against the glass, shaking the floor. Inside, my friends were cheering. Grandma squeezed my hand. I looked at the reflection of myself in the glass door. I saw a woman who was tired. Yes, a woman who had scars. But I saw a woman who was standing in a house she bought, surrounded by people she chose, wearing the ring of the mother who loved her. I wasn't waiting for the knock on the door anymore. I had built the door, and I held the key. I turned away from the railing and looked directly at you. Yes, you. If you are listening to this, sitting in your car, or your bedroom, or washing dishes in a house that feels like it is shrinking around you, if you have ever been told that you are too difficult, or too quiet, or that no one cares about your story, if you have ever been erased from the picture frame, I want to ask you a question. I want to ask you where you are standing right now. Because you have a choice. It is the hardest choice you will ever make, but it is the only one that matters. You can choose option A. You can stay in the hallway. You can let them tell you that you are small. You can quietly pack your bags and fade away, letting them define you as the person who wasn't enough. You can let them keep the ring locked in the drawer. Or you can choose option B. You can build your own balcony. You can learn to code, or paint, or write, or run. You can build a table with your own hands, out of wood you paid for. You can create a house of second chances. And when you are standing in your own light, you can open the door only for the people who have proven, by showing up when it was raining, that they deserve to be there for the fireworks. I know what I chose, and looking at you now, I think I know what you are going to choose too. The door is open. Walk through it. Thank you so much for listening to Lena's story. To the very end. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening from a busy city like Cleveland or a quiet town like Lakefield? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If this story touched you, please make sure to subscribe to the channel Lila Revenge Stories. Hit that like button and smash the hype button to help this story reach more people who might need to hear that they are not alone.